Hello everyone, and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. With Philip Nothard and Curtis Hutchinson, bringing you all the chatter that matters.
Well, Curtis, we better declare this as a C word free zone for today, aren't we? We're heading in. It's the 1st of November this morning, so October's gone. We're heading towards the end of the year, but we'll try and keep a C word free zone.
Yeah, well,
a little longer.
I think we'll add the X word as well, won't we?
Yes.
Yeah. But you're right. It's November. We're right at the back end of the year now, aren't we? We've actually published 71 episodes this year, and we've still got a few to go.
Yes, busy. But we'll talk about one of them in a minute, won't we? But we've got a couple of shout outs this week, and we will be playing you a short 5-minute clip from our interview with Chris Plumb from Cap HPI, who joined us this month to talk about the October trade value movements as we move from October into November. But obviously we did sort of push him a little bit on what he expects for the remainder of 2025 as we move into November and then into December, and get his view on a bit of the fuel type performance and stuff like that. But we've got to clip it for you this morning, but the full interview should be on your podcast feed from Thursday of this week. So if you've not listened to the full interview, please do so. It's a great chat with Chris, as always, but we will start and play you a short snippet of that interview later this morning.
Yeah, and sort of a teaser alert here, because we're due to record an interview next week. So we won't say who it's with, but it's actually with a car maker. And it's going to be an interesting one because they always do well in the customer satisfaction polls. So we'll be finding out what their approach is, how they manage that. So do keep an eye on your podcast feed, because that should be popping up, early next week, I'd say.
Yes, definitely. So a couple of date reminders. It's the 5th of November next week, Bonfire Night, just in case anybody has forgotten about that. I'm sure everybody's hearing about warnings of keeping your pets inside as the bonfire and the fireworks go off. But more importantly, for our sector, we've got the VRA seminar, which we mentioned last week's podcast down at Warwick University. There are a few spaces left. I think that we've got capacity for about 200, and we're very quickly approaching that number now. So if you do want to attend, please do get signed up now. You'll see it through the VRA channels on the social media and my own and fellow board members, and that's the 19th of November. And that's just on the same day as the Motor Trader Awards that evening as well. So we've got a lot of people trying to get into Warwick and then heading off down to London straight after for the Motor Trader Awards.
And a week before both those events, on the 12th of November, is AM Live. And as we've been saying for the last couple of weeks, we'll be there. If you haven't been to AM Live before, it really is worth a visit. It's great for networking. There's some good speaker sessions there and various suppliers. So, if you haven't been, it's as I say, it is really worth making an effort, isn't it?
The coffee shops do very well, don't they? Because everything it's all about, we'll catch up over a coffee. So everybody's going to be sat at the coffee bars having a catch up. But it does give us the opportunity, hopefully, if we can work it out logistically with Curtis, myself, Mr. Godbold and Mr. Whitton. Hopefully we'll manage this year to get a selfie with all four of us. I know we didn't quite make it last year, but it is the opportunity where all four of us are down there at the same location on the same day for once a year.
Yeah, definitely. And it is funny you should say that, because my observation when I go to AM Live is there's so many deals that are going down.
Yeah.
and they're going down over coffees in the breakout areas. So for networking, it is such a good event.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. If you're a supplier and would like us to profile your business and reach our audience of dealer bosses, managers and decision makers on one of our dedicated supplier specials episodes, get in touch with Curtis and Philip at motortraderadio@yahoo.com.
Companies already featured in our supplier specials include Prospecting Dynamics, iVendi, ETT, Generational, and Jigcar, and many, many more. So you can find all of those in your podcast feed. And if you'd like us to profile your business, then just message Philip or myself at motortraderadio@yahoo.com or message us on LinkedIn.
You're listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors.
So headlines this week come from AM Car Dealer, Motor Trade News, and from the Nationals, The Times and The Guardian, starting with a row has erupted between lenders and the FCA over the regulator's refusal to extend the consultation process. Geely becomes the latest Chinese car maker to launch in the UK, with models now on sale and plans to recruit 50 dealers by the end of the year. EU car makers are reportedly days away from halting work as a chip war with China escalates. We have the latest financial figures for John Clark Motor Group. And finally this week, how drones could be deployed to deliver car parts.
But before we get to those headlines, we'll start with the extract I mentioned earlier from our interview earlier on this week with CAP HPI's Head of Current Valuations, Chris Plumb, and his take on what drove October's trade movements. So, as always, we get yourself and Jeremy on. So let's kick off with obviously, talk us through, the headline figure at that 3-year 60 mileage point, One, how, what that movement is, what it compares to in terms of previous October movements into November, and probably as a way of as a follow-up with that, how this movement fits into trends in the year to date and where you expected it to be.
Yeah, of course, Phil. October kind of ended up as a pretty steady month overall. And when we closed off the data for November's monthly figures or monthly publication, we saw that values at 3-year 60, the 3-year 60,000 mile point, did slightly dip, but only down by minus 1.1%, which worked out to about £225. We think that that's a fairly manageable adjustment, nothing too dramatic. But what's quite reassuring is that this movement is better than the long-term seasonal average, like kind of we've seen all of this year. I think it was only March this year, and the movement that we made was in line with the long-term seasonal average. That's going back to 2012 when we introduced Cap Live, but taking out the 2 affected COVID years. So the typical drop into November is roughly about minus 1.5%. So yeah, 0.4% stronger than that seasonal average. So it kind of shows that there's an overall resilience still in the market. If we look back at the strongest November, that was in 2021, which was actually, we saw values rise, a bit of a shock for that time of year, but 1.2% up. But that was the tail end of the remarkable run of the 8 consecutive monthly increases. But on the other side, the weakest year was 2023, the start of that realignment and adjustment in the final quarter of the year, when values actually fell by 4.2%. So the 1.1% this year feels like more familiar, more in line with seasonal averages. But yes, it's still fairly positive. I think interestingly, though, when you look at where values have gone from a cumulatively perspective at 3 years for this year, they've only now just dipped into a state of deflation. So they're only down 0.3%. So a 3-year-old car currently is worth 0.3% less than at the start of the year. So again, a pretty strong indicator to just how stable values have been.
And how does that look compared to last year? Because it seems that it's probably a similar sort of position to where we were last year.
Yeah, I think it mirrors last year's movement exactly. So last year it was a minus 1.1%. And we think, and we'll touch on what's going to happen in future months, but when we look at where the volumes are this year versus last year, they are very similar. The market feels like it's in a similar position.
And within that minus 1.1% drop, and we'll look at fuel trends in a moment, Chris, but before we do, were there any notable price movements by age points for the month?
Yeah, so values did soften across all the age and mileage profiles that we report on. So at the 1 year mark, 1 year 10,000 miles, prices eased back 1%, which is roughly £370. The biggest drop came in percentage terms, at least at 5 years, 80,000 miles. That was a 1.2% drop, or £165. The best performing age point and mileage point was 10 years, 100,000 miles, which equated to 0.7%, which was a massive drop of circa on average about £35. But the movements, I'd say there's been this general seasonal softening across all the age and mileage points that we report on.
And turning to some of the vehicle sectors, how did they perform? And maybe start with SUVs, as they're by far the biggest sector that you have data on, aren't they?
Yeah, SUV is the most dominant sector in terms of the disposal data that we're receiving. But yeah, SUVs saw an average drop across all sizes of minus 1.1%, roughly £200. But as we said, SUVs now make up, or in October, made up 40% of all the sold transactional data we received. So if we narrow that down to 3 years old, they account for just over 60%. And to put that into perspective, that's a huge jump from 2019, when SUVs had a share of only 35%. So I think where there's more choice available in the market, buyers can be a little bit more selective for certain models, and we've certainly seen that this year. So we'd see that when there's a little bit more availability, it can put a little bit of pressure on some values. But there's been a little bit more nuance within the SUV sector performances. So if we look at large SUVs, they actually held steady at 3 years, not coming down at all in price at 3 years, but at 1 year they came down 0.3%. Medium SUVs saw the biggest drop at 3 years, and that's where we see probably the most concentration of data within SUVs, down 1.5% or £280. And small SUVs moved back 1.2% or £150. Touching on those noticeable movers, they did include models like the Qashqai petrol, Volvo XC60 diesel. Again, these are at 3 years, the 3 year point, but down 5.3%. Jeep Renegade hybrid down just short of 4%. Renault Capture down 3%. But it wasn't all negative, so let's not just focus all on the stuff that's going down. There were a few models that we saw rise in value. So Audi SQ5 diesel up 2.1%, Mercedes AMG GLA was up 2%, and the Porsche Macan climbed 1%. So maybe the more premium end and the more high performance, but we did see some go up. And encouragingly, again, we'll touch on BEVs in the near future, but they did go up as well, which for SUVs, which was encouraging.
So, I mean, good insight there in the Curtis from Chris, as always, and a good interview, just over 30 minutes thereabouts with Chris, sort of digging into some of the detail behind that headline figure that they published in their editorial.
Yeah, and we also got him to talk about, as well as his views on the rest of the year, November and December, also his take on Chinese new entrant brands and how car valuations are being set for them. So some really good insight. So do check out the full episode, which is in your podcast feed.
Yeah, but we'll get over to the headlines now. And the first headline, as Curtis alluded to earlier, is in the Times. And this is that a row erupts as lenders push to delay car loan compensation. And this is that the FCA says complaints cannot be paused indefinitely after demands from the motor finance firms to extend consultation on payouts to millions. So, yeah, this story is going on and on, isn't it?
It is, yeah. And I must say the Times coverage of the whole debate has been really, really good. So this, as you say, is the latest update. And it really focuses on a row that's erupted between the motor finance lenders and the FCA over the regulator's refusal to extend the consultation period, which was set at 6 weeks. And this consultation is on the £11 billion compensation scheme for customers who were missold finance. Now, the FCA published its proposals on the 7th of October. So the clock is really ticking on those 6 weeks. I think we've only got a couple of weeks left. And this is the lenders really challenging it. And the piece goes on to say the lending arms of some of these financial institutions and car companies are pushing to increase the length of the consultation process, and extending it would risk delays to consumers, according to the FCA. So by extending it, you run the risk of delaying payments to some of the customers who are affected. But one of the key points of this story is really the lenders pointing out that if the consultation is not extended, if they don't have chance to present their cases, then payments might be made to customers who did not actually incur any losses, which obviously the lenders are keen to do. And we're reaching a sort of stalemate here, because one senior source in a lender who's quoted in the story says everybody's horrified that they, as in the FCA, are unwilling to listen to reasonable arguments. And a source within another lender said, surely the FCA's lawyers are telling them that if they fail to give the lenders a proper opportunity to take part in the consultation, it will strengthen their case in a legal battle. So we're already talking about legal challenges to the FCA's proposals here.
Yeah, and before we get on to sort of discussing this, the second story related to this is in the Guardian, and this is that Santander urges ministers to intervene in UK car finance compensation scheme, saying that lenders' chief executive says redress proposals could affect jobs, supply chain, and the broader UK economy. And this is where they are obviously urging the government to intervene in the 11 billion car finance compensation scheme, claiming that the current proposals could end up inflicting significant harm to consumers, jobs, and the broader economy, as I've just said. And that the comment marked some of the strongest criticism to date of the FCA, the Financial Conduct Authority redress scheme, which, as Curtis just alluded to there, which is meant to draw a line under the 14 million historic car contract loans that may be deemed unfair because of the compensation arrangement between lenders and dealers. Now, this is going on and on because, I mean, obviously Santander are a significant investor in the UK in general, both in jobs and the economy there, and they are obviously really upset about this. I mean, obviously they are a Spanish-owned business, UK lender, that obviously come out swinging, calling on the government to take action and push the material change to the city regulator proposal, which are out for the consultation following this landmark Supreme Court hearing in August, as we know there. So, I mean, this one is continuing. I think, I don't know, I think I'm a bit, I do support both of these stories in myself, Curtis. I think it seems that the FCA are focusing on the speed of processing and simplicity over the accuracy of the redress. I think there is indications in the sector that there are, out of the 14 million, there's lots of cases that may not be due any redress, and it's on that redress. And that the risk with this is that there are 14,000 cases that are similar to the Johnson, where there was significant unfair, that aren't going to get the money that they probably need, they should be getting, because it's a blanket up to £750 and that's it. So I don't know, and they don't seem to be, as you said on the first story there, Curtis, listening for delays and a longer consultation so that they can really put a case together to the FCA why this redress should be done differently to ensure the right people get paid out the right amount of money out of the scheme. which is a bit dangerous.
Yeah, I think the FCA are trying to make this a sort of a case study. You know, they're really setting their stall out on this one, and as you say, potentially, we're talking about 14 million car owners and finance that was sold over long periods, between 2007 2024. So it is complex. There's a lot to be sorted out here, and with just going back briefly to this Times story, the FCA is quoted within it because in its consultation document, it said that it's traditionally it would use a 3-month consultation period, but it said had it done it in this case, it would have been, and this is a direct quote from the FCA, it would have been prejudicial to the interests of consumers. So it's highlighting that sort of the FCA wants to get this done and sorted out quickly. So there's definitely two sides to this particular story, and we will be revisiting it. I can say with some confidence.
I think we will. I mean, I am a little bit facetious on this one, and I'm sure there'll be people listening to the podcast. But I think I get the FCA wanting to push this through, but it could damage investment into the UK because of they're going after the captive finance as well, so manufacturer finance as well that are in the more European and international market. So, it does question and put pressure on UK investment from these businesses because, how do they operate if they are fighting against this kind of decision? On the positive side, there is a potential economic side to this, that you've got 14 million consumers that have the opportunity of potentially got £750 in their wallet to go out spending. But is that at the cost of international and European businesses that are bringing money, 14 billion or whatever, the 11 billion into the UK economy? I don't know. The facetious side, maybe there's a political angle on this that's being played into it, but we will see. We will see. I won't say too much more on that one. We will move on, Curtis, before I get drawn into politics on this podcast.
Okay, moving to safer ground, heading over to Motor Trade News, and the headline there is Geely opens first UK dealership and completes first sale within hours. Now, it's probably not that long ago. I would suggest maybe 2 years ago, if there was a new brand launching in the UK, we would lead with that. But Geely joins a whole host of new entrant brands, and it's the latest one this year. There are more to come before the end of the year, and bearing in mind we've only got 2 months left. But this is Geely, so it's opened its first site, which is Glyn Hopkin in Chelmsford in Essex, and it opened during the week. And with hours of opening, the team completed its first retail sale of the Geely XC5. So that good PR there coming out of Geely. But I think what's possibly more interesting within this particular story is that it highlights that Geely plans to open 50 sites before the end of the year. Now, it's already got 25 on board, and obviously is in advanced conversations with 25 others. So we're going to be seeing a lot of partners coming on board with Geely.
Yeah, I mean, I think the feedback so far is extremely positive from these new entrants that are coming into the UK. And as you say there, the Geely one, and we did speak to Steve Young, didn't we, about the new brands and their view on it, and Chris Plumb on the podcast interview with Chris from Cap HPI earlier. This week we talked about their view and how they're handling the new entrants, but obviously they are coming very quickly, aren't they? And it's posing lots of questions at the minute, because we are a 2 million new car market, and the speed in which these businesses, these new entrants are coming into the sector. Every new car registration that they take, it takes one from potentially somebody else, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. As we see on a monthly basis when we pore over the SMMT figures, so it's really at the expense of the legacy brands who have seen their market shares decline quite dramatically in some cases over the last 12, 18 months. So everyone's after 2, 3, 4, 5% of the market. So something's got to give. But we'll be back with the rest of the week's big stories after the break.
You're listening to all the chatter that matters on Motor Trade Radio. Powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand, wherever you are on your podcast feed.
Now, the next story we're heading over to, and this one it didn't quite go right below the radar, but it's not been talked about that much, has it? The challenge and issues that's starting to present themselves with the chip manufacturer over there in Holland. And we're covering the story in the Guardian that is EU car makers days away from halting work as chip war with China escalates. And this is the industry body says that next year, semiconductors are dwindling after Beijing bans export of key components. I mean, you didn't think we'd go back there, did you, Curtis, ever?
No. I mean, we've had the return of Dieselgate, and this week we've got the return of chip supplies being restricted. So, yeah, it's a fascinating story, this, and it's interesting that it was picked up by the national press because it hasn't got a huge amount of coverage with across the trade titles. But the report in The Guardian is very much along the lines of car makers in the EU are reportedly days away from closing production lines. This is the warning that's coming out from FCA, the European Automotive Manufacturers Association, and it is warning over a crisis over computer chip supplies from China, which is escalating. And if you look at some of the brands involved in this, within this story, it mentions BMW, Fiat, Peugeot, and Volkswagen, who are all now working on reserve stocks as supplies are dwindling.
Yeah, no, and I think that's it. I mean, they sort of talk about obviously, last week the UK, European, Japan, including those brands, and sort of talking about their dwindling, and saying that they surveyed their members this week, and some of them already expecting imminent assembly line stoppage, which isn't really what you want to hear. And this is that the next year chip ban was a blow to Europe's car sector, which has already been hit by the President Xiaoping decision to reintroduce controls on exports of rare earth exports as part of the escalating trade tension with the US. But I think that has changed slightly this week because Mr. Trump gave the meeting a 12 out of 10 for his meeting.
Is that the equivalent of 110%?
It could be, yeah. I think the comment was on a scale of 0 to 10, I give it a 12 or something ridiculous that he gave. But yeah, I think I think reality is with this one, and it's not quite the same challenge that we had through the pandemic for obvious reasons. But I think anything that upsets the supply chain as we close off this year, and particularly for manufacturers there in Europe, is not news that they really need at the minute.
Yeah, and at the heart of this story is what actually happened in regards to Beijing banning exports of Nexperia chips at the start of the month, the start of last month, in response to the Dutch government's decision to take over the Netherlands headquartered company on the 30th September, and also to suspend its Chinese chief exec after the US flagged security concerns. So this isn't going to be a matter that's resolved quickly. This could be drawn out, and I think there's plenty more to unravel from this story over the coming weeks.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to roll on, and I'm sure we'll start to hear a little bit more from those manufacturers that are involved, and I think we'll start to see if there is any production, what the production shortages are going to be, and what the impact is going to be on that. But we'll finish off now with a couple of headlines from AM Online, and the first one, and we touched on a little bit about John Clark recently with their acquisition, but John Clark Group profit performance hit by market headwinds, and that the John Clark Group reported a pre-tax profit of 19 million for 2024, down from 22.9 million year on year, as the Scottish Motor Group continues to perform strongly despite market headwinds and increased costs, and that the group's latest results on Company House show that on a like-for-like basis, underlying operating profit was 26.55 million, down from 27.7 million in 2023, whilst the underlying pre-tax profit was 20.5 million. So a great result for this business, and on the back of, like I say, that recent acquisition as well, Curtis.
Yeah, and the results reflect the impact of property redevelopment costs of £1.5 million and high depreciation on demonstrator and courtesy vehicles, which is something we've reported on from other dealer groups over the course of the last financial year. Overall, the group increased turnover to £1.06 billion, up from £1.03 billion in 2023, and maintaining its position as one of the UK's top 20 groups within the AM 100. And as you say, we last reported on John Clark Motor Group just a couple of weeks ago, because it acquired Hawco and Son Group, another group operating in Scotland, representing Audi, Volkswagen, Skoda, and VW commercials, which was a very, very good fit for John Clark. So they're well positioned now to grow in 2025.
Yeah, definitely great work by those guys. And we haven't, and finally, now last week we were talking about flying cars. This week we're talking about flying parts supply. And this is in AM Online, car parts for trials delivery by drone. And this is that a drone delivery service is being trialled by GSF Car Parts to enhance the way it serves its car repair customers who often need parts fast to get their delivery. I hope there's not semiconductors coming out of Holland, because they need to be very quick with that one, won't they? But yeah, interesting on this one, Kurt. I know we've always talked about this, haven't we? In the pharmaceutical sector, in other markets, use drone delivery, don't they? In there, depending on the country and the challenges that they face. But yeah, interesting now it's UK businesses talking about it.
Yeah, definitely. And if nothing else, it's worth heading over to AM's coverage of this story, because they share a video that GSF have put out of the drone in action, and it's fascinating because you see the parts box being picked up from the warehouse and delivered to a garage. Quite interestingly, from some height, so you wouldn't want anything too delicate to drop from those sort of heights. So maybe they'd hover lower for more delicate items. But it really is just demonstrating, what we will be seeing in the near future. And this is kind of intimated by Steve Horn, Chief Exec of GSF Car Parts, who said, "We've all seen the potential to diversify how we get parts, consumables, and tools to customers. I imagine a future where we can select the best delivery method for garage and e-commerce customers, depending on location and their specific needs." And this is really where the drones come into the potential uses in the future. So fascinating development. And as you say, hot on the heels of our flying car last week, which looked like a giant drone anyway.
It did really, didn't it? Yeah. So keep an eye on this one. I mean, things are developing. We've got e-bikes and everything else, and why not? Why not have your parts delivered by a drone? I suppose it's using up those unused battery cells for something else. Great there. So do have a look at that video. But that's it for this week. So as we said right at the start there, if you've not listened to the interview there with Chris Plumb from Cap HPI, do check your podcast feed and have a listen to the full detailed interview there with Chris. More details around what happened in October as we move into November, but more interestingly, his view on what to expect for the remainder of this year and the new Chinese entrance there. But a lot of headlines covered, and I think a couple of them may not go away, the FCA being one of them, Curtis. I think we may talk about that one again soon. Oh, and by the way, and just to say, just on the back of that, Curtis, you'll like this one because I know you do. So as we were recording, I had a text come through. Our records show, our records show you could be owed up to £2,382.86 in missold car finance. Really? I thought the limit was £750. I've never had a car loan, but anyway, never mind. I thought that'd all stop, Curtis.
Well, you better get that in pretty quickly because the consultation period is not being...
I've got days left. But that's it for now, isn't it? We've covered a lot of headlines there.
Yep, on that bombshell, that's all for now. Many thanks for joining us on the Motor Trade Radio podcast. Until next week, it's goodbye from me.
And it's goodbye from him.
Thank you for listening to the Motor Trade Radio podcast, powered by Motors, the driving force behind multi-site advertising. We'll be sharing all the URLs from this week's headlines on Monday morning. To make sure you receive them, just subscribe to the free newsletter on our LinkedIn page. Just search Motor Trade Radio Podcast.